Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, welcome back for another episode, my friend. How are you? How are things going in the Flyer fan world from
Uh,
Toronto?
yeah, things are going pretty good. I mean, excited for this episode. We got a lot on tap and a lot to discuss regarding the
Sure.
Flyers, so it'll be a fun one. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right, man. Not too bad. I think it's a weird season, dude. It's not like last season. I know I like we've talked about it over and over again, but like even the losing doesn't feel the same. It's a weird year. It's a weird Flyers era. Like
Yeah, it
it's
is
hard to get a
definitely.
good read on this team, and it doesn't even necessarily feel like they're on the same page still, to some degree.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting for this season specifically. I think John Tortorella has a big effect on that and just what he brings and how he's kind of interacting with the players, media, and everybody involved. I mean, he's really put his touch on a lot of different things and a lot of things we're seeing differently from the team this season. But I mean, there is still some constants from last year. Obviously, like they're haven't been winning as much as they were at the beginning of the season, but then now you do see that in their play of late, even though they were losing, the play's a lot better, and now it's kind of translating into some wins and even closer games as we go along. So it's definitely different compared to I think a lot of the losses from last year. I think there's a lot more lessons being learned by the players ultimately, so that's a positive to point to, especially for the young guys on the team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Before we continue, just shout out to Jim Steaks again. They're still not open, but again, shout out to Jim Steaks, our
I believe they're
sponsor.
rebuilding. Yeah, they're or starting the rebuilding process. So
Yeah,
hopefully everybody can get some steaks soon, right? And they're back up.
you can see it. I've passed there a few times on South Street, because I run past there sometimes. And it looks boarded up, but obviously there are plans. They told us a while ago that they're rebuilding, so I just don't know the soon to be date, but we'll let you know when they open. It'll be glorious. So yeah, let's get into the first I guess our recap. Flyers come in with a nice win here, a 5-3 win over the Colorado Avalanche as we go on this call. Now they did lose a tough game to New Jersey, one where they played really well right before that as well. They lost the game, I believe it was 3-2. Escaped me for a second. And it was a game where they really felt in it the whole time. And again, I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but we talked about it. Like right now, it is talent related, but and this is why we were saying, right? It doesn't feel the same because it's hard to be angry at them. Like I think you can see like the fans, you can tell the ire and the anger is not being like thrown at Delorier and McEwen and Brown and a lot of like even Lawton or any of the guys that you're like maybe Hayes is getting a little bit of it right now, but for the most part, like it's not really thrown at the players. It's being really thrown at management where you can see like John Tortorella has at least established this like honesty level relationship with the team where the team does put together an honest effort every night. At least it feels like it, not every night, but let's say 80% at least, right?
It's pretty
80
close, yeah.
90% of the time.
There's a handful of games where I'd say they weren't their best, but most of them
Right.
they're either it's a one goal, two goal difference. It's nothing that like is getting out of hand where it's a blowout, or you
Yeah.
just see them not actually actively being in these games like they have been, right?
Yeah, we've had some instances, but I would say definitely above average in that category, at least in comparison to how we've looked in the past. That is actually what hurt the Flyers most of the time was that those bad starts, the fact that they had the talent that they'll creep their way back in and they go to overtime and they lose in overtime, right? Because they weren't good enough in a shootout or whatever. That was like the Flyers story. It was the team that's like constantly kind of underachieving. Now it doesn't really feel that way. It feels like okay, they're about where they should be for the players that they've had available.
Yeah.
Now players are starting to come back. And you can see it's changing the score to some degree. Like the Flyers are able to score a little bit more with more depth. And as they roll back in, that's going to continue. It's just what's the ceiling, right? But
Yeah.
go ahead, Vasily. Why don't what are your thoughts on the last two games?
Last two games, it's been interesting stuff just from the perspective that you're playing two top tier teams, albeit I mean Colorado is at the top of the standings, but obviously they're coming off a Stanley Cup win, and I mean they're dealing with a host of injuries as well. And I
Sure.
mean it just shows, right? Like a team like Colorado, it's important to mention that look at all the injuries that they're facing, and they're nowhere near the top of their conference or anything along those lines. They're just hanging on to the last playoff spot, right? So when you're affected by so many injuries, no matter what team, obviously it's going to be a bad thing for you. And just in terms of results, it's going to hamper you there. So I thought that was something interesting to point out. And then, I mean, hopefully, well wishes to Nathan McKinnon. You never want to see like one of the top five stars in the league go down just because it's not good for the game of hockey in general. So hopefully he can
He's also
recover.
really likable.
Yeah, he's a good dude, exactly. So
Yeah.
hopefully he recovers quickly there. And just to start with the New Jersey game, I thought it was pretty impressive for the Flyers just because they basically dominated the whole game aside from maybe 5 minutes in the third, which basically cost them. Just a bit of a mental lapse, mental focus. But New Jersey, you got to give the Flyers credit just because they have 41 points. They're second in the whole league overall. So they're like a really good team, and the Flyers they held their own with them, and that wasn't the first time this season. Obviously, in the opener, they did get the victory against them. Just looking at the stats here to kind of rattle them off, the Flyers outshot them 33-18. The hits battle was pretty even, 30-32 there for the Devils winning, and then the Flyers did win the special teams battle. Were 1 for 3 on the power play. And the Devils did not score at all in their power plays. They were 0 for 3. So I think that's been something to point out the last two games, too. Their special teams has been a lot better,
Yeah, yeah.
more akin
Power
to
play as
yeah,
well.
power play, PK, but more akin to kind of the start of the year. And it does make sense that when you have guys like Lawton, Konechny coming back, that obviously
It
both of those
Konechny
guys.
being a huge aspect there, obviously.
Yeah, Konechny, I mean, has been great all season. I think he has 22 points in 20 games, so 10 goals, 22 assists
Yep.
there. And he has 3 goals in his last 3 games, so he's been on fire coming back. Hasn't really hampered him. But yeah, getting Lawton Konechny back, that's big for the PK. It's a whole PK unit. We've kind of touched on that before. And just with the New Jersey game, I mean, I thought they controlled a lot of play. They didn't really let New Jersey transition up the ice quickly, and that's mainly what their game is about: is transitioning quickly, moving the puck fast, and using their speed. They have a lot of speedy players and speedy wingers.
Yeah.
The Flyers did a good job shutting that down there, and then we're managed to keep it a tie game going into the third, but just some lapses with the turnovers, right? And that kind of cost them in the third period. They do almost come back and show that resilience that we've been seeing a lot more of, obviously, this season. And unfortunately, there's an overturned goal for Joel Farabee for goalie interference there on that play, or else it would have been 3-3 and potentially going into overtime. But they didn't quit, right? And I think that's the main theme in that New Jersey game, that even though they were controlling the game early and controlling it throughout, and then they had that lapse, they went down, they did come back, and I think that's a good thing to point out, because when you're playing that well and you haven't had the success that they've had lately, that can be frustrating for a team. So they could have quit on that game, right? And then just to hop into the Avalanche stuff, I mean, obviously they're hurt as well. Then McKinnon goes down, so advantage to the Flyers, but nobody's going to feel sorry for the Flyers, so nobody's going to feel sorry for the Avalanche, right? And I think that's a thing to note. So they capitalized on those injuries. They played well. I thought Georgiev really struggled, and they capitalized on just his poor rebound control, especially the Farabee goal where he came down the wing there, shot for the rebound, and then resulted in a goal.
Yep.
And then another guy to point out in
And
the
then it
game is,
almost happened again. The same
yeah,
play.
exactly. That
Same
was
play
that.
happened again later, and they
And
almost scored too.
Konechny almost scored as well. So maybe
Yeah.
look to see more of that out of Farabee, right? Obviously, he's found something that's working in terms of creating chances. I thought Sandheim had a really standout game as well. Like just
Yep.
lately in general, he's been hopping in the offense more, and it's paying off. I think he has 8 points in his last 9 games, so he started off kind
Oh,
of
nice.
cold.
I didn't notice that. Good stat.
Yeah, so he started off kind of cold, and now he's kind of picking it up. And then obviously you have a little bit of a breakdown in the third. I don't think Tortorella was too happy with the way things ended because they were playing such a complete game. You kind of wanted to see them finish strong, but ultimately they do hang on to the win. So that's probably what matters for them, to get another win, especially against a team like Colorado, where if it wasn't for the injuries, I mean, they're probably not expecting to mark that as a W on the calendar, right? Just based on
Yeah.
their talent level and where the Flyers are at. So that's pretty much it for the first two, I would say, from my perspective. How about you, Yariv? If you have anything else to add there?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think you did a great job explaining that actually. And I think we've seen a bunch of these games, in my opinion, recently where Flyers actually weren't the worst team. Flyers could have won some of these games. They had more talent. You see a couple superstar players coming in the zone or something, make a couple sick deeks, and you're like, oh my God, like we don't have anything like that right now.
Yeah.
Or, or Konechny's not in the lineup, or you're just a reminder Couturier wasn't there. Now, like, you see as the guys are getting healthy, and, we'll talk about JVR and Atkinson and whatnot in a little bit. And obviously the missing key ingredient there is Couturier, but it's like, this is a team that has some flashes of a good team. Like, there is some basis here of a team that can compete. It has some glaring holes, without a doubt. But these games aren't horrible to watch. Like,
No, they're interesting
games this year where I'm like, I gotta like just shut this off.
Which last year I found that happening a lot of the time. I'd be saying to myself, like, I can't continue to watch this.
Yeah, dude. Like multiple games in a row where you're like, yo, this is like this. And now it's funny because the record, what is it, 13 of the last, I think we were saying it prior, 13 of the last 15
have been lost.
They've lost.
Yeah. And they're 9-12-5 through 26. So
it's actually really not that bad. Just
they're
really
close
start.
They're close to 500. They're 3 wins away technically from hockey 500 as it stands. But
now, if they do put some wins together, which be ready for this, guys, because if they do get healthy, and there are teams that are kind of marred by injuries right now, it's not just the Flyers. Other teams are starting to pick up injuries. Like, it could balance out where the Flyers could pick up some wins here and be in that bubble conversation again. I think we just are still kind of stuck with where they're limited as far as, the fact that Couturier is really not going to be available this year. And even if he is, at the very end of the season, probably when they're out of the playoff hunt, realistically, or even in the playoffs. And we don't know what kind of shape he's going to be in at that point. Who knows what's going to happen.
And just with the centers, right? Like, they're obviously lacking centers. And when you're trying to compete in this league, it always comes back to this. I think we touch on it a lot, but when you just don't have the depth, it's going to be hard. Obviously.
Yeah. Well, okay. And I think Fletcher was getting a little bit of heat for this, right? We talked about this a little prior. You said it earlier, Flyers are only 6 points out of a playoff position right now. Again, they're not even close to mathematically eliminated. So you cannot expect this team to be like, oh, yeah, we're not going to make it. You can't expect the GM to be like, oh, yeah, we're only 6 points out. Like, he's going to say that to his team. What is he going to say to the players who are working their butts off that see that they're 6 points out? I just don't. I don't think they have it. Yeah, I don't think they have it.
He's not going to announce
whatever.
He's definitely not going to announce it or say it to the media. Like,
you're managing people.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the way people are hoping that he's going to do it. And I mean, I think it's just there needs to be another way that he brings forth the same message. I just think the wherewithal in his messaging hasn't been great. And I mean, we can say that's been a theme with Fletcher since last season, because that whole aggressive retool thing, right? The messaging hasn't always been great from him.
Yeah.
So there needs to be more of a consistency, obviously, between the two, coaching and the GM and all that.
Well, no, I'm sorry to cut you off there. I totally agree with you. I think I think that's like more of like that thing I talk about where it's like you're just turning the knife on people. It's more of his actions don't say much.
Yeah, that's true.
Is like the things that the actual moves that he makes, they don't telegraph exactly what's going on, and they haven't materialized into much. You don't look at his moves as like, oh, like, it's not awful to bring in Bellows. It wasn't bad to bring in McEwen and Brown last year, waiver pickups, or Sedlak. Like, Sedlak's look pretty good, actually. Like, these aren't bad moves. They're just like, okay.
Yeah. It's just par for the course. Okay, we're treading along, but we don't really know, based on what he's saying, what he's doing, where things are kind of going. And there's no outline just based on kind of what he's done in the past that predicts maybe that he's going in a certain way versus like rebuilding, trying to contend next season. Like, what's really the plan, right?
Well, yeah, and I agree with that, but it's also like you're selling an idea to people, right? And you look at the way this team, like, okay, what would be cool, and I'm not saying that he should do this right now, I'm just using this as an example, okay, that I think the fans would want to see is like you trade JVR at the trade deadline. This is complete hypothetical, right? Trade him at the trade deadline. You get at the very least a second round pick for him in this year's draft, right? Like maybe it's even higher up, or at least second round pick, something you could package to move up, whatever, a high value asset in this draft,
Yeah.
something. It's hard for me to say he's going to get a first, right? But let's say he gets a second round pick. And then at the same time, you get a player like Bellows, right? Like equal to Bellows in return. And it's like, oh, a young left wing goal scorer and a second round pick for a guy that we were like desperate to get rid of. And not only did you clear cap space out and show us that, you know what I mean, you're building towards this really immense draft that we're all like staring at.
And adding a future piece too.
Yeah. And a player that can play, you're kind of just, you're bringing in Bellows off the waiver wire.
Yeah. But something to point of significance that gives faith that, okay,
like,
look, he's going to make some moves and it's going to be okay.
Exactly. Like on a micro level, like to us, to the people who are in it day to day or watching this team, regardless of how good they are, we're like, yeah, Bellows, that's interesting, cool, whatever, But like, I even remember when the Sixers traded for Harden last year. I'm not saying that's like the best move, but like even I was like, whoa, I gotta check this out. What is going on here?
Well, that's the thing, right? Like it's a move that's notable that brings attention, and whereas Fletcher I don't think he's really done that whatsoever, aside from maybe a couple moves. Like there's maybe been 2 moves in his tenure where you've looked at it and say, well, you know what? Maybe it's not the best move or the right move for the time, but he's moving the needle in one way or another. I think that's Voracek for Atkinson and the Ellis trade. But since those, he hasn't really done much.
I would say the Ellis trade is the only trade that he has made here where it appeared, and it was ironically my least favorite. It appeared on the surface that the Flyers like got a top end player.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was appropriate package, right? A young defenseman and a young forward for a guy with a really good reputation.
Yeah, but based on based on their needs, you could classify it as a win. But since those moves, like the Ellis,
Yariv, nobody knew who Matt Niskanen was. Like hockey people did.
Yeah,
I know who he is. You know who he is.
Yeah, he was a good move too. But
right, he was great. I would say just as good as Ellis.
People weren't as excited just because it wasn't like the sexy name. Whereas Ellis, I mean, he's been on Team Canada's. He's had more of a pedigree, first round pick. Things of that nature.
Gaudreau was the first opportunity to really do that here.
Yeah, which he obviously didn't do and opted to kind of shy away from, which I don't fault him because realistically, I don't think that was the move that the team needed to go for anyway. Like you don't need to allocate all that much money to a winger. You need the center. You need the center for that money, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, for sure. But let's be annoying idiots for a second. Yeah. Not idiots, but anyway, let's be devil advocate here, and I'll be annoying for a second and be like, well, why aren't you smarter than me? Like, why aren't you able to bring in Gaudreau, move out a bigger asset at not the worst price ever? Where you're like, oh, okay, that wasn't actually that bad. We only had to move this. Like, that used to happen.
Yeah, I mean, technically that is an upgrade, right? Like, if you would have moved out JVR and brought in Gaudreau at $2 million, hypothetically, it's an upgrade.
Hayes.
Yeah, anybody really.
So, the Flyers used to move out Jeremy Roenick to bring in Peter Forsberg.
Yeah, exactly.
That is aggressive, ballsy moves. And yes, it hurt only because Forsberg had injury issues, though. But Forsberg on his face value, that is a franchise-changing player. The Flyers had a chance to go after Jack Eichel. They stayed out of that battle. You know what I mean? And don't say because of injuries, because he obviously didn't have a problem with the other players and some injuries and being banged up. So, I look at that.
There's some swings that you look at, and especially at the asset pool, like at that summer, right, where Eichel was available, where, I mean, if you're the Flyers now and you could have gave up, let's say, that first round pick you gave up for
cost TK.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I would have done it, to be honest. If you would have gave up that
Jack
first
Eichel?
round pick, for Jack Eichel, it's worth it. It's what the team
look at our
center, right? Exactly. Is the center depth. So
okay. So like I'm kind of like not really going on our topics completely here, but this all aligns. But look at our center depth. Right.
Yeah.
Let's get into the Hayes thing. Let's get into that right now because this is a pretty big deal, right? Because Hayes is no longer a center. I mean, at least temporarily. I don't know. I don't want to say he's in the doghouse because he is over a point per game player and Tortorella is using him a lot. So in my opinion, he's just saying, hey, look, good player, but I need centermen to play better D. So right now, and obviously they weren't scoring that much too. Right now, I mean, you're looking at the centers are Noah Cates, Morgan Frost, maybe Scott Lawton, but really Lucas
It's Lucas
Sedlak
Sadlak. Yeah.
and Patrick Brown. That's what, or no, I'm sorry, Tanner Lazinski was last game, right? So,
Yeah. Now it's going to be probably
and
Patrick Brown.
obviously, yeah. Now, well, we'll see what happens because, yeah, I mean, it probably will be actually because JVR is coming back most likely. But,
Yeah.
but again, you look at that center, it's like that's like a joke, right?
Well, yeah. Like I don't think there's one guy who's playing center right now that would probably be a top two center on most teams in the league. So like it's not ideal. I think it's really
You could
telling
say
what
top three,
yeah,
considering most
but
teams wanted to move Noah Cates to the center. Though I will say I am a humongous Noah Cates fan. I completely agree with Tortorella on what he's doing with
yeah,
him.
they're trying to develop him,
I
right? Just to
I
be
I'm
that two-way
on
center.
yeah.
So
But again, you're developing that. You need time. You need space for him to do that. He's capable of doing it. It actually speaks to him as a player. The fact that they're
yeah.
able to do this with him at all is ridiculous.
Honestly, I think I
But
mean just a comparison and kind of a sidetrack. I mean, Jordan Stahl, I don't know if he'll have the same offensive upside, but
that's a good one.
it reminds me of a young kind of
on,
Jordan Stahl, the way
on
Pittsburgh
the
would use him.
type of way that he plays and around the way
Yeah.
he plays around the net for sure.
Yeah. Very
Yeah, the way he
responsible. Good on the
skates a
peak,
little bit too.
good on the penalty kill as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
But
no,
yeah, back to Hayes. Sorry, Yariv.
no, it's all relevant. I mean, look, here's the one thing I'll say about Hayes. This is a career year for Hayes. If you are not a playoff team, which I'm not convinced the Flyers are heading in this direction, you gotta consider be like, okay,
Moving him if you can.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's having a career year. That
Even
means
at a reduced price, man. Like even if you have to eat a little bit of
so
money, I think it's worth it.
so when Kevin Hayes was traded years ago, he returned a first round pick,
Hmm.
Brandon Lemieux, who was a decent prospect at the time. And I think it was a conditional fourth, which became a third if they made like the second round or something like that.
Which he did not. So
Right. So it ended up being a fourth round pick. Now, if this guy and he had less than a point per game. This is the first time ever he's a point per game player in the league.
yeah, exactly.
This is maybe Hayes' max value. And I'm thinking in my head, like, if he's really not here to be a center, we need a center.
You might as well move him.
Can you, if he's not really part of the future here, or maybe I don't know, can you move him, get a first round pick for this year? This is what I mean. Like, I think it would be a crushing blow to this team right now. But
Yeah.
if you're not in a playoff race and you recognize that, you know what I mean? I don't know how things are going to turn out. You got to look at that as be like, okay, well, we can find another center with that kind of money open.
Yeah,
We need a
exactly.
center. We must find another center.
Center.
If Couturier comes back and he's gold, I'm a lot more comfortable with even a Coots Cates 1-2. But having a legitimate number one it changes everything. But
Well, yeah.
having that, it's like, dude, we're in trouble. We're in trouble as a even if we're a playoff team, we're in trouble.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
I would say definitely for Hayes, like it just goes back to kind of what
I don't
Tortorella's
think we are a
saying.
playoff team
No,
without Coots.
no, definitely not. Not anywhere close in my mind. But I think if you look at Hayes and just what's going on with his whole situation and the center to left wing and back to center and then now back to wing
Yeah.
again, that's kind of been flip flopping. Tortorella said it in his pressers the last few days, right? You just can't trust him to make the plays and
He hasn't played well
make
defensively this
yeah, you
year.
can't trust him to make the plays, make the coverages down low like he needs his centers to do in his system. Hayes hasn't been able to do it. It's cost them goals. So Tortorella said, you know what? We're not going to keep costing our team goals. Let's put you in a position where you only need to focus on the offense mainly. And then we'll let Cates develop his defensive game as a center because we want to do that anyway. So it's a win-win for Tortorella, I think. And then, I mean, he said in the long term, are we going to look to move Hayes back to center? He said, we're going to take it day by day and see. Who knows? And I think, I mean, shout out to Jason Martinez. I think he kind of mentioned this on his show. Maybe it's the point in Hayes' career where he is a winger from now on. Maybe he is no longer a center. That's something that, I mean, who knows if that's something he's willing to accept, but that could be where it's trending for him potentially. So, I mean, if that's the case for the Flyers and Tortorella does not want to use him as a center moving forward, and they can't figure out a way to get him to be better defensively, I mean, I think if you're the Flyers, you can't afford to have another high salary winger. You just have too many of them, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so just to your point, like if they can move him, I think they have to look into it. I mean, obviously it's going to be probably something that's a more of a deadline deal. Personally, I don't think it happens in season just because there's too many years associated and the term is too um it's too long for a lot of teams that are deadline shopping because most teams want to get a guy who's either expiring this year or is going to be a UFA next year. So it's like a rental for a year and a half or so, right? I think it'll be hard to do it in season, but probably in the off season when teams are looking at their budget, their assets, what they're kind of looking for in terms of building their team, then I think it could really be a possibility because I mean, like you're saying, if he keeps at this point per game pace, he's going to be selling him at the highest value possible. And if you're Chuck Fletcher, I think you got to look into that if he's even around. Who knows? But I think the Flyers have to look into selling an
I
asset
mean,
like Kevin
I think it
Hyde.
depends. I
So,
think it depends how a team views Kevin Hayes. Like they might be like, well, we could really use a 6'5" strong winger. That's
yeah.
what this team is missing. And I'm going to be looking for that type of player anyway in the offseason.
Yeah,
So I
exactly. So
can
it
get him
depends.
now for my playoff run, and I have him locked up for 2 more years. And quite frankly, the
I
cap's
think
going to be going up.
I think that's
So
attractive though, right? Because if you're a team and you're even looking, let's say, to place him at 3C hypothetically, and they still view him as a center,
they might
um,
see that too. Yeah.
yeah, they might see that. But like hypothetically, on the free agent bargain
Actually, they
hunting,
probably would,
free agent
to your
bargain hunting
point.
at this point, in my estimation, like what's 5-6 million getting you? Basically like a 50-60 point guy. You're not really getting a point per game guy for 5-6 million anymore. So if he's at 7.5, like you might say, okay, it's a little overpaid. Maybe the Flyers need to eat a million or so to get him off the books for 3 years, then you free up like 6 million for yourself. But if you're a team, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'd rather take Hayes because then in 3 years we could re-sign him at a lower hit if it works out. And also in 3 years, you have even more flexibility to make another big signing
Yeah.
for another and use that money again, right? So I think it's advantageous for some teams that are in this buy now, try to win constantly window like a Colorado, like those teams that are Tampa Bay that have been contending all these years, just because it gives them flexibility probably down the line that they can maybe use. Whereas if you're signing a free agent, I mean, you got to dedicate usually the 7 or 6 years. It's got to be a long contract, or else he's not going to want to sign with you, right? So
Well, I think it would be a team that's probably like has cap space, like moving forward, and maybe has taken a recent jump
yeah,
in like even a team like Buffalo or something like that. I
yeah,
don't know if they have cap space, but that's a team that like, yeah, I think they do. Yeah, a team like Buffalo, like if they're in a playoff position, they're like, we're actually pretty good. We have Tage Thompson. It'd be really cool to add Kevin Hayes to play with Tage Thompson. That'd be a massive line of a
yeah,
6'5" playmaking
yeah,
goal scorer and a 6'6", playmaking center. Where I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas, but stuff like that.
yeah.
Um,
I could see it. Even a team maybe like LA,
yeah,
something
a
like
team like
that.
LA, but Dallas even, I don't know. I don't know. Or it could be a team trying to switch cap money. But honestly, this is all theoretical and he might be playing center again. And let's just get into this actually, because I was, I'm looking at the lines. So let's just say right off the bat, JVR today was reported to be in the orange jersey, rather than the yellow, the non-contact jersey at practice, which means he could be playing
Yeah, Tortorella made
today, I
some
guess, as this air
comments. Yeah, he
season
made some comments as well. Tortorella said,
or tomorrow.
I think if they get a good report from the training staff that he had a chance of playing, so hopefully all things look good there and they get him back because that'll be a help for them obviously with the
I
goal
mean,
scoring. So
it's essentially his hand, right? So it's like I don't know too much about re-injuring there. It's just is he really ready?
yeah,
Is he going through enough pain? Does he have enough
yeah.
mobility to be effective? Is he going to be have any issues? But I don't know. I could see him. I could see him being ready on Thursday, and if he is, so unfortunately, Tanner Lazinski, we didn't mention. He did have a goal the other night. He probably played one of his best games as a Flyer. He actually has been playing a lot better recently. I don't think that's been talked about enough. And he is a guy with some NHL upside, obviously still. Hopefully he does take over that bottom end spot. I don't love Patrick Brown's game. I don't think he adds too much value to the team. Penalty killing wise, he does. He's aggressive, but it's just like, okay. I mean, like we're fine. Like it's not something we desperately need. So I kind of just look at that and I really just want to see this team come together a little bit more than what they've been doing right?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Ultimately,
I think a lot of the things with this team really, it's just when you have so many injuries like they've had, it's hard to kind of develop a chemistry between your lines, between a lot of players. Like they've been shuffling so much. You have a couple guys in there that, I mean, they look good when they play together, like Hayes, Konechny. I think Farabee, Frost, and Tippett look good, but other than those five guys, like on a nightly basis, I can't really point to too many players that
yeah,
I'm thinking that they're on the same page. Whereas, I mean, when you start to get more offensively skilled guys like a JVR, like an Atkinson eventually back in, and then they're playing more consistently with one another and in more consistent lines. It's not just shuffling in and out all the time because of these injuries.
yeah,
I think there'll be more, better play, at least offensively, potential for more goal scoring. But even still, with that, I always look back at the centers with this team as kind of the defining factor. Even going back to the Hayes stuff, is that without the center depth and just losing Couture, just is such a big loss just
no,
for them,
it's
like driving
immense.
play and being able to create offensively, which I mean, it's just unfortunately with this team, it's the elephant in the room, right? And to them probably getting back into a wild card race, most likely. I know there was one topic too we wanted to bring up, Yariv.
Oh, hold on. Let me just add something before we move on.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
yeah, just the whole thing there about JVR and Atkinson potentially coming back and all these guys, though, it does create these kind of question marks here where, um, who's playing where? Like we already have Hayes on the left side. Then you have Hayes, Farabee, JVR. Okay. And then you had Lawton there. And you're already moving everybody out of the middle. Nobody can play center. So are you going to continue with Sedlak? Are you going to keep Patrick Brown as fourth line center? And then who moves up where? Are you going to start dropping Farabee lower down? Like, doesn't I don't know. I feel like we're in such a weird place with Kevin Hayes being at the left wing, and with JVR coming back
It's
and
hard to
potentially
put a lineup
Atkinson.
together. Yeah.
It's hard to kind of understand where the lineup is going from here. You know what
No,
I'm saying?
I get that. Yeah, yeah. I think you make a good point just because I mean once you bring these wingers back, you already have a line of Cates, Konechny, and Hayes, and then you do have, I mean, Sedlak, McEwen, and Lawton. So like I'm assuming what will happen is it'll be Sedlak, um, Atkinson and JVR, I'm guessing, and then you keep together Frost, Tippett, and Farabee, and then you drop Lawton to the fourth line. But I don't see that because I don't think that.
You
Um,
see, as you're saying out loud, you're like,
I
well,
don't. I don't
nah,
think Tortorella wants to put Lawton on the fourth line. And we kind of got into this discussion on Twitter the other day, where I mean, I do think that once these guys get back, I wouldn't be surprised if Lawton goes to center and they put Sedlak down, even though he's been playing so well. But maybe we'll see. Like maybe it's not going to be more of a proto. Maybe it's not going to be as much of a fourth line as you think. Whereas I think even this season we've seen like the fourth line is getting more minutes than usual. So I think they're not. It's not a prototypical fourth line where it's only getting like 6-7 minutes a night. So it's possible they do some rotating throughout games and stuff to work got more guys in. I don't know.
yeah.
It is a weird lineup in general, and it kind of leads me to believe like with Tortorella's comments earlier in the year that we're trying to figure out who's here and who's not. If maybe a guy like Hayes, to our conversation earlier, maybe he is kind of on the way out potentially, despite the fact that he's having his best career year, which is kind of weird to say, right? That like a
Well,
guy's having his best year, but he might not fit in the long term plan, basically.
right. And if he's having a career year, like we look so much as like, oh my God, 3 more years of Kevin Hayes on, but like an NHL team would be like, oh, 3 more years of a point per game player locked up, not going to go anywhere, has really good size, isn't old, right? He's still, I think he's what, 29?
Yeah, he's basically like later years of his prime, pretty much.
Right, exactly. But he's still in his prime. It's like this is not we're not eating an end of
It's
the
not a
road
35 year
contract
old
here.
guy
Yeah.
yeah, it's nothing crazy like that.
And
Exactly.
again, it depends on where the Flyers view themselves. Like removing him would make our
Yeah.
team worse. I want to make that very clear.
Oh, 100%.
We would easily be worse without him.
Maybe that's the plan.
But that's maybe just for this year, that's the
Yeah.
plan. And you go, okay, but let's hope Couturier is healthy, but we still have this void at center.
I mean, I think the goal obviously is you hope Cutter Gauthier fills out one of those
Yeah,
voids.
but
I mean, you can't bank on
well,
him.
exactly.
You can't bank on him though,
But he's
right?
a
So
rookie,
that's the
right?
thing. That's what I want to caveat. Like he looks good. You can't bank on him. I think their ultimate goal probably is if they're moving on from Hayes specifically is you hope Couturier comes back healthy. You can't bank on that. So that's number one.
Right, exactly.
Hope
Well,
you hope Gautier is what project him
and
to
he's
be.
NHL ready.
Yeah, but you can't bank on that because he's
So
only
another,
19.
yeah, two question marks.
And then you hope, and I'm assuming this because the last offseason didn't really prove this to be true, but you hope that Chuck Fletcher realizes, or whoever's at the helm realizes that, well, guess what? We have no centers, just like I've gone through. Maybe we should sign one in free agency,
That's what I'm
but there's
saying.
no guarantee that that's going to happen because it has not happened the last 2 seasons. So that's the thing, right? But if I'm the team, that's probably my like moves, and what I'm looking to do is probably get rid of Hayes if you can, just to free up money for yourself. Use that money for a younger guy in free agency that probably fits better and aligns with more of your younger players because it makes sense, right, going forward. And then you hope obviously you can get Couturier back and Gautier is decent enough to be a third line guy for you, but none of that is really guaranteed. And I don't really know if I have faith in Chuck Fletcher to really navigate the
No,
waters on any of them. I
me
think
neither.
it kind of goes back where we goes back to the overarching point that we kind of started with. I think that we wanted to make is, I mean, is there any guarantee that Chuck Fletcher's really going to be around going into next season? And do we think that he's going to make it to the end of this season in general? What's your thoughts on that?
I think if things continue, I don't think he'll be around next year. I think
Okay.
I'll go back to what I said last or at the beginning of the year. And again, I could definitely be wrong. It's a complete guess on my part, but I look at it as to keep your job, you need to make the playoffs
Yeah. And
or
that's
to
what he's
show us
focused on based on
or
his
to
comments anyway.
yeah, and I don't see a path to that
Of this
available to
season.
you.
Yeah.
And I don't see you look. If he makes some really smart moves, maybe I haven't seen anything to change my mind on
I
that.
haven't seen very smart
I
moves for all the past 2 seasons,
right.
really.
I've seen
So,
Tortorella do things to get me to buy in and to get
but
fans
what
to buy
has Fletcher
in.
done for us, really?
Exactly. And that's why I
Yeah.
look at it and I go, okay. I'm like, yeah. I
Yeah.
don't I said this, I think I said this on the podcast already, maybe I didn't, but I was talking to Charlie. I went to practice the other day. I didn't even talk about this, but I talked to Carter Hart. He was in the locker room. I'll talk about it.
Awesome.
I forgot to even put it on the on the thing. Jamie actually was like, dude, why are you talking about your practice? I was like, I don't know, I'm weird. I don't even record my conversations with them. I'm sure you guys want to hear that stuff. Um, but yeah. Um, what was I just saying? Sorry, I was
You were just talking about you're at practice. Talk to Carter Hart.
yeah.
You're
So,
talking to Charlie O'Connor, I believe.
oh yeah. So I was talking about has any GM survived 3 10 game losing streaks?
Fuck, I don't think
And
so,
he
man.
started laughing. He's like, I don't. He's like, I don't think any GM's ever had that. He's
Yeah.
like, so I would say no, and I'm like, exactly.
Yeah, I mean that's
that
a
that was my
pretty
that was my point. I was like, you're already on thin ice,
yeah, when you bring
right?
it up that way, like it really looks even worse than it probably has been. But like he
Not
deserves all
saying
the
it's all his
criticism.
fault. I'm not.
No, but a majority, you know what? Let's be real.
He's
Like
responsible.
yeah, exactly. He's the GM. This is his team. He's at a point in his tenure where no, it's not Ron Hextall's team anymore. You can't blame the previous. Like no, he's made so many. This is not the same team as it was 4 years ago at all.
You're telling
Like
me he doesn't see
basically,
Cole Caulfield lighting up the NHL?
and he's like, oh my god. But literally, it's not the same team at all, right? Like there's maybe 5 or 6 guys that are held over from the Hextall team. So it's on Fletcher at this point, and I mean it lays at his feet. I think something really to note, based on like the question that we asked, is he going to be around? Is NHL Rumors Daily. So a lot of people probably know him on Twitter, NRD. He hits on a lot of stuff. He is very well connected, I would say. So if he's going to put something like this out there, I would not take it very lightly. But he did mention that who's to say, all these players in the Flyers or what's happened with the Flyers relates to Chuck for much longer. Maybe they're Danny's players soon. I think that kind of segues perfectly into the topic that we want to go into next. Like, is if it's not Fletcher, and in my estimation, my thoughts are that he's no longer probably going to be the GM. I don't know if it's going to happen in season, but I think it's probably going to be a situation where he maybe gets moved, bumped up to
Here,
president.
Oh,
is
sorry. Go ahead.
Briere. He maybe gets bumped up to president. Briere takes the GM, and then he kind of oversees in a managing role. But is Briere? I mean, based off NRD's comments of what we're thinking in general, is he the next guy in line? Would you say?
So here, okay. So let's talk about this replacement. There are options, obviously, if he gets replaced, and the way that he gets replaced could change things as well,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like if you're going with Danny Briere, that tells me you want somebody who already knows the team, who's already familiar with the situation. You want to continue a plan that you've already had in place, and you think
Yeah,
Chuck Fletcher's good at something, but you think that somebody else needs to be. And we saw this happen
making
with
the
Bobby
hockey
Clark.
ops moves
We
exactly.
saw it happen with Holmgren. Right, it's like, hey, you're a good businessman. You're good at leading the business side of this, but we need somebody else
In
coming
terms
up
of
the
hockey
trades.
ops, yeah, we need
Right.
a different mindset, different brain.
So does that mean though that they're tanking if Briere's taking over, or does that mean that they're fighting to make a play? Obviously, it's too early to tell. But the one
Yeah,
thing I think if they change GMs, it's essentially them signifying we think that this draft is really important
and we need to really pivot to that, and we think that Danny's the one that is going to lead us
to
into
lead
that.
that.
Yeah,
Yes,
and I agree, and it makes sense, right? Because even though Fletcher and Flair haven't done a bad job with their drafting, I think the
it's
Flyers,
just it's not going in
yeah,
the right direction, right? You're pulling brake and you're
exactly.
saying this is not exactly going where we're going to go. And Fletch, why don't you focus on that? We'll let Danny take over from here, and
I think
we're
it's
gonna
something that
go
we've
for Connor
touched.
Bedard
It's something that
or
we've
whatever.
touched on a lot, right? And I think it's something worth noting that I mean, a lot of the top GMs in the league with teams that have had success are all former players, like a Steve Yzerman, like a Bill Guerin,
Jason Blake
like a
in Florida.
yeah,
You can
exactly,
keep going down. Joe Sakic.
yeah.
Keep going down the list of names. I mean, outside of
Yeah, like
it's
Rob
growing in
Blake in
that
LA,
direction.
yeah,
Yeah,
Rob
it's
Blake in LA as well. Yeah, and
um
then
Cam Neely in
Cam
Buffalo
Neely, yeah, in
or
Boston, yeah.
Boston. Why did I say Buffalo? Boston.
Yeah, but there's a lot. So I can see why the Flyers want to do it, right? Because you have a guy who's knows the game really well, and then but you also bring in a guy too that probably has a lot of connections around the league and maybe with other GMs, maybe more than a guy like a Fletcher. So who knows how that's going to help in your trade negotiations in the future, things like that. But I mean, when you bring a forward player with that much pedigree, it adds a level of respect, obviously, to the management team. Whereas I don't know if the Flyers have been getting that in their negotiations lately. I think it's maybe been more of a laughing stock type of situation,
Yeah.
just with how things have been handled. I think that really needs to change, obviously, because we pointed to it. Like, when was the last time Fletcher won a deal? That's not by mistake, right? Other GMs know they can take advantage of him. So I think the Flyers need to kind of get out from under that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, with Briere coming in, I think it's enticing, and I don't see why the Flyers wouldn't do it just based on where they're at. I think it's time just kind of to change a direction, change course. And it seems to me like Tortorella and the things that he's saying are more in line with potentially Briere being the guy, just mentioning that they're having a lot of hockey type of conversations, and he loves his hockey mind and how, there's just so many things that they align on, and how the team needs to be built going forward, and the culture and the identity. So if you have your coach saying that out in the open, I just think the writing's probably on the wall, and it's kind of signifying towards that. But who knows, right? There could be other candidates maybe we're not even aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. It was complete speculation, but I don't know. It just doesn't look good. It's something in my gut tells me like I don't know how you continue going in this
Yeah.
direction. I mean, I've never seen the team this interesting
Yeah,
to the average
exactly.
fan.
The
The average
average
fan has
fan is
no idea
very
what to look for
the average fan is
on
very
this team.
disinterested, and I
They
believe
don't know any of the players on the
a
team.
lot of casual
They know
fans
Hart.
a lot of casual fans I'd say are probably tuned out, to be honest, from
They
the
know
Flyers right
they know
now.
Carter Hart.
But wouldn't you say that, Yariv? A lot of casuals that probably wouldn't watch the Flyers unless they're good or not
Yes,
watching the team.
100%. My friends don't know anybody on the Flyers.
Yeah, exactly.
My friends who watch like the Sixers and the Eagles,
Yeah.
and they'll watch the Flyers with me, but they don't know anybody.
I'll
Like,
give you an example. I live in Canada, so hockey's bigger here than it is in the States.
yeah,
All my buddies I grew up playing hockey with that I still talk to, like all my buddies that like I've been friends with for like 10, 15 years that watch hockey religiously, huge fans of their own respective teams. They know Carter Hart, they know Provorov, they know Konechny.
Coots.
Couturier if he's even in. That's
Yeah,
basically it. Like Atkins and JVR, but
they don't really know our team
they
at
don't
all.
know anybody else. Like maybe
There's nobody to.
D'Angelo. Yeah,
There's nobody really to get your attention
yeah. Other
right
than a
now,
tip in maybe.
and
But
even if the team plays well and they start winning, it's not a marketable team right now. You
In terms of star power, yeah.
yeah, because they're also not built to win a playoff round. Yeah,
Yeah.
I still look, I'm no expert, but I still stand by I don't know how you win a playoff round without a number one center. Or at least like a top a legit top six guy in the
Well, Yariv, you know what the answer is? You don't. You
yeah,
don't win a playoff
exactly.
series
You don't
without a
make the
top six.
playoffs. You don't
Yeah,
make the
exactly.
playoffs
You
without
don't
that.
get exactly. You don't get a chance to even put yourself in that position. I think, that's probably got to be the main thing, right? Like you get a guy like Briere in, you hope that him and Tortorella are on the same page, and then you start building towards the future with that draft, and then maximizing the assets you do have currently to kind of get things back on track and really set that foundation. Because I'd argue that, I mean, in terms of where the team's headed, like their wing depth's pretty good. Their defense is pretty solid. They have a good goalie. If you can add some NHL talent at the center position, it's really not looking too bad in my
Yeah.
opinion. But
I really hope that I'm tired of this team looking like they are directionless and like looking like they're not. It doesn't have to be this way.
no,
It does not
and
have to be this way. Like some of
it's
these wounds are self-inflicted.
yeah, because there's just no direction. We've kind of pointed to it, right? Like throughout the past off seasons, like there's no move and there's nothing that's grabbing the casual fans' attention. That's the first thing, and that's on the GM. But there's also nothing that you're pointing to saying, well, you know what? I see what he's doing here. I see what he's moving towards. I see like, okay, this is the piece that we need. There's nothing like that where you can point to and say, well, yep, he knows Fletcher knows what he's doing. Whereas, I mean, obviously, you don't know that's going to happen. You don't know if that's going to happen with Briere because he's never been a GM in the NHL. But I'd rather give it to a guy who's a former Flyer, has been a player in the league in the past, probably a decent talent evaluator, because I do think that there's been some situations where the Flyers in the draft have missed probably on some talent that they've needed, like a Caulfield. And I don't think the Flyers are in a position to do that this draft. I think that's why it would be important, as you're saying, to probably get a guy like Briere in there who
Yeah,
is going to be offense first. I think
and they
100%.
also they don't also still don't even have a second round pick this year. You know
Yeah,
what I
you got to
mean?
try to recoup that and
You
hope.
don't you don't have many picks in this really strong draft. Like they have to look. I agree with people's criticism of this, and that's what I liked about the Hextall era. You got this level, but you were stacked in assets. Like
Yeah,
it wasn't like, oh, you're like, oh, we have an abundance of draft pick. So if you wanted to pull the trigger on a big move, you had to go out and even get a Johnny Gaudreau. You
yeah,
could have done it. Now it's like we're just not in the same
and
position
I
anymore.
mean Fletcher too. He could have done something like that. Like think about that. Think about that playoff run going into the bubble, right? Like who did he add that to that team? Derek Grant and fucking Nate Thompson. Like think about all the assets he had back
Two
then that
fourth
were
line players.
yeah, two fourth line players, and they made it to the second round. What happens if you added JG Pageau like the Islanders did? Maybe do
Well,
you
that was a lot though. I think they gave him two first round
they
picks.
did, they did. But I'm just saying, just in hindsight, right? Like you don't want to play hindsight GM, but if that's a team you're going to add to, that would be it. And like the Flyers at that point were primed with assets, right? And they were even less proven, so you probably could have traded them for more at that point, and he didn't cash in. But now you're
That's
to
what I
the
mean.
point
He's
where
always underwhelming.
yeah, you wasted it. So like I just don't think that in all aspects, right? Like it's just time for something fresh, and
That's
I
what I
think it's
mean. He
best
hasn't had
served.
the answers.
It's best
And it,
served, yeah.
excuse me. And he's slowly been degrading the
Yeah.
team. Just it's not again, he's not like full incompetence and it's like fires every night. Like he's done some things that are actually pretty good. You know, he
Some
locked
shrewd
up
stuff, yeah.
he locked up with bad luck with Couturier, but it was a great signing at the
Yeah,
time. He
and
wasn't injured at the time
I've
either.
said this. I've said
And the
this
Farabee
too.
contract's also good.
Yeah, the Fairview one's good as well. I mean, he was signing the Provorov connecting deals, I believe, as well. Correct. So,
Yeah.
those weren't bad deals or anything like
Not
that.
like
A couple,
everything he's done is
yeah,
bad.
a couple overpays, and
Niskanen was a great trade.
Niskanen was a good trade. Ellis
How
before
long ago
the
was that?
injuries, yeah, Ellis before the injuries was a good trade too, right? But like you're saying, it's just like, what have you done for me lately? And it just has not been a
I
lot,
I will
really.
say I
His
think
drafting I like, but other than that, I think that's more on the assistant GM, to be honest. So
I think he has improved the Phantoms so far this
yeah,
year.
but like I said, that could be more to the drafting side too, right?
I think he's added some better AHL players,
Yeah, yeah, I
but
agree
he
there.
did make them worse in the process too.
Yeah, they were pretty
Like he
bad the
made
last
them
couple
worse. Yeah.
seasons because
So
he was
like
trying to subtract from them to add to the NHL team, which backfired because they weren't any good anyway. So
Yeah. Look,
Just a
I think
lot of misses. It's a lot
it's
of misses we're pointing out.
that's kind of what I'm saying, man. It's just like, look, I'm cool with making excuses and be like, look, he's not that bad. That's fine. But
But
like,
at some point,
we
you
need
some
something more than that. Not that
yeah.
bad.
And I mean, if you're the organization now where your whole identity from the coach and what you're hearing is accountability, we need to be responsible for our actions. Like, what speaks more than just starting fresh and removing the guy
That's what it feels. Yeah,
that just missed and made so many
totally.
mistakes, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's get a guy who can come in and be like, bring in some new fucking energy to this team, some new energy
yeah.
to the fans. Maybe he's a better public speaker. You know, I don't know who's out there. Like, maybe this is a mythical guy, but and look, to some
I
degree,
think Brea would fire the fans up just because it's
I
of who it is,
yeah, I
obviously.
think Briere would be
But
huge, and maybe they're worried that if it doesn't work out Briere, they'd have to let him go, and they don't want to do that in general.
I
You know,
think
where
you can't play devil's advocate like that if you're the Flyers because you have a guy that can be a really that looks like he has the makings of a successful candidate in the house, and you're on this rudderless ship right now. You might as well hand it over to him and see what he can do for you, right? Because if he's not going to be good for you, he's probably not going to be
well,
a good executive for another team.
there
So
is
give him a shot, right?
the temptation of what's his name from Toronto? Oh my god.
Oh, Dubas, if he gets let go, yeah.
Yeah, well, like, look, okay, and the thing is with Dubas is Dubas might come with Austin Matthews.
Yeah, maybe.
And
Never
again,
know.
this is all fantasy stuff that I'm talking about, but it's all kind
It's
of is.
possible. Yeah.
But I agree with you, man. I mean, we've been saying it for a bit. I think we're probably early on it, but I think if this continues and the Flyers have, look, if you look at this on paper, this losing streak, I was just showing my roommate the losing streak throughout the years, and he's like, "Oh my god!" He's like, "I'm like
Terrible.
showing him on ESPN. If you go and just look at like the schedule, overall
Yeah,
schedule,
you just see a bunch of L's. Yeah.
you see a bunch of L's, and it's just like, holy crap! Like when you see it like that, you're like, how is he surviving this? That's what I
Yeah.
said about AV. How did AV survive these? I don't understand. I never saw this in the past. We are
Yeah.
accepting mediocrity to some degree here. I can't deny that. Like you haven't Chuck Fletcher. You're not a dumb dude. I don't even know if you're a bad GM, but whatever has happened here, whatever has transpired, has not it is not accumulated into a better team. It has
No.
slowly degraded into where we are right now, where we were a bubble playoff team on the way up. Now we're a bubble playoff team going,
On the way down. Yeah.
or it feels like on the way down. I would say we're more stagnated than on the way down because we still have young guys, but doesn't feel like we're on the
Yeah,
way
but
up.
without the roster players that are missing now, it does feel like you were saying
Well,
on the
with
way
the
down.
injury,
Yeah.
after the injury spurts, like it seems like
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
kind of behind us now a little bit outside of the Couturier thing, but we already lost
It's not
Patrick,
it's not
Ellis.
ideal. It's not ideal, and I think it kind of goes back just to. I mean, there's obviously some sort of disconnect organizationally in general. Like I don't know if it's on an ownership from an ownership standpoint where, I mean, they just don't. They're not invested maybe in like what's going on with the team, and then that's how you kind of get these 10 game losing
Maybe they
streaks
just
and
don't know how to
Fletcher
solve
stays.
it, dude.
It's possible. I mean, I kind of think it kind of leads into just the final touch on this discussion and conversation just with our topic list. I wanted to ask is there a disconnect between the front office, ownership, the coaching staff, all in general? Like, I'm not sure if there is, but it
I
seems
think
to me that there is segments of it if you kind of look deeper,
I think
right?
there's absolutely a disconnect between the opinions of the players, the team management, and then like
Tortorella
Chuck
and things.
Fletcher
Yeah.
and like I think like the coaches, the coaching staff. It's not that I think that they don't get along. It's not that I think that they don't like each
They have
other or
different
that
ways
they're
of going about things,
it. No,
basically.
I think Chuck Fletcher has built something here. I think Tortorella is coming in and criticizing it.
Yeah, kind of saying we need to tear a lot of this down because it doesn't work and doesn't make sense.
Yes, and I think
Yeah.
this is what Chuck Fletcher. When you heard Chuck Fletcher was worried about, like maybe that's where he's like, well, I don't know if we see things eye to eye, so he might not agree with some of the players I have here, and he might not believe in that guy, like Frost,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, which I don't actually think is the case with Tortorella, but I think what it does is exposes some of the stuff where you can't really say, hey, well, the effort's not there and all that. I think it's like he's kind of just calling out all this stuff. And I think that's kind of what makes it seem like they're not on the same page. But I think it's more of no, it's all blunt out in the open. And now you got to
Yeah.
start going through this. There's a lot
And
of stuff for Chuck
seeing,
Fletcher to change.
yeah, seeing exactly what needs to be changed in order to kind of develop the team and the culture identity that a Tortorella wants. I think that's a great point that you just made, Yariv. And I think it's definitely something to point out too. Is I mean, John Tortorella's been a part of winning organizations, right? Chuck Fletcher has not. So I think that's obviously
Well, he's
you
never
can't
won a
just
cup.
yeah, he's never won a cup. And I mean,
Never
that's
made it
not
far into the playoffs.
no, he's never made it past the second round. And I mean, is that an indicator as to maybe he just doesn't have the touch on how to build that winning culture, winning identity for a team? I think that's something you really fairly do have to evaluate. And personally, if you are going to start building things from the ground up, and things do need to be changed, I mean, Torrell is obviously a perfect guy to do something like that because just the respect he commands from players, you're going to get that buy-in, which I would argue the Flyers, despite the results so far this season, like the players are working hard, they're buying in 100%.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing to see, even despite the losses. But when you have a coach and a general manager that just aren't on the same page with how things are being built structurally from top to going down the line there, I just think it doesn't bode well for the future and what you're trying to do. And I do think at that point, like you need a guy to come in and kind of take over the reins, somebody who maybe is going to be more in line with what Torch is looking for and the way he's kind of like hoping that things are built foundationally, which Fletcher hasn't done to his liking, obviously, as he's kind of assessed it as he's come in.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows who that's going to be, but let, just to answer the question, like you were saying, Yariv, I think 100% there definitely is some sort of disconnect, but I don't know like what ways of solving it the Flyers can do in season without really firing the general manager.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's repairable. Basically, is the point I'm trying to make. Like I don't know if where the team's at if you're able to bring them out of this place with the management in place and intact that it is right now. I just think it's going to be really hard
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
general.
No, I think so too. That's why it's like if you're going for this top pick and all that, I think we'll see signs to that. But as of right now, we don't really know. What we know is Bobby Clark is helping the team learn how to win faceoffs.
Yeah, that's the positive that we have, basically. I thought that
What's
was
it?
hilarious. I thought that was hilarious because, like, what was the last? I can remember. I mean, what was the last teams that Bobby Clark I think was helping out on faceoffs was like 2012 Flyers, like Giroux, Couturier when they were just coming up. It's kind of like a same, not the same transition, but like it almost feels that way. Like
I mean,
whereas like the team's
he.
transitioning just like that era was, where you're transitioning from the Richards Card era to Giroux's era. Not saying that that's happening here, where the team's transitioning into a new era, but I think we're kind of on the
I mean,
midst in the midst of that
it
almost.
took Couturier a while to be a top faceoff guy. It took Giroux a while to become top faceoff guy.
Hey,
They didn't
Bobby
do it
Clark,
overnight.
man, Bobby Clark knows what he's doing on those faceoffs. Obviously, one of the best of all time
Bobby
in
Clark
the
knows what he's
dot.
doing in general. I actually
Yeah,
hate that we keep pointing at them being like, "Oh, we got to get rid of these guys because the
I
team's not."
I don't agree with that personally. I
I
mean, like
I never
this is
have.
my thoughts. I mean, Bobby Clark was a great GM for his time. Obviously, every GM has their time, right? Like you're not going to be a GM of a team for how long? Almost 20 years, like him, and
Yep.
have success for all 20 years. Just not the case realistically. Um, Paul Holmgren, Dean Lombardi, Bobby Clark, they're all senior advisors. What's a senior advisor? They advise the general manager. The general manager can go to them for advice, things like that. But what's the key word? Is advise. They do not. General manager does not have to take their advice and use it.
Yes.
And I mean, if the organization runs structured in a way where the senior advisors are actively telling your GM to make moves, and if he doesn't make the moves, then like repercussions are had or something like that. I actively don't think that's how it's being run. But if that's the case, obviously it's not a good thing. But I personally don't think that's the case. And I mean, I don't think you can blame. I don't think you blame guys like that for something that is the GM's job, in my opinion.
I just think that they're really competent human beings, and just to
Yeah,
assume that because they're involved, it's a
does it?
negative. I think
No,
it's
exactly. Why wouldn't it's like any job, any position in life, right? Typically, don't companies keep around guys that were CEOs or past, let's say,
yes,
had success in past fields as advisors? You know why? Because they're smart guys. They've been around the business and that field, so they know what they're talking about, right? So it's smart.
yeah.
It's a smart thing to do in business in general, in my opinion.
Well,
But
it's also I just think people are just make too blanket statement like, oh, we need to get away from our past. We need to get towards it. It's like all this.
no,
No, you just need to find the right guy.
yeah,
You
pretty
just
much.
need to find the right
The
guy.
right, the right, well, the
Don't need
right
to
mix of
freak out.
management. Yeah, the right mix of management, the right
Yeah, there is
GM
no
and
one
coach.
rule. That's
exactly.
my whole point. There's no one rule like, oh, get away from your past. It's like, no, you got to
No.
do it all. Find somebody new and fresh and also honor the
Embrace the
past.
past as
Yeah, you got
well.
to do
Yeah.
both. You don't have an option. The knowledge is in both. You need the
That's a
answer that's
great
in
that's a great point, right? Like, I mean, there's an easy way to walk the line between both and be successful. The Flyers obviously have had difficulty doing that, but it doesn't mean
I don't
it's
know if it's
impossible.
easy, but
Yeah,
I know
it's
what you
not,
mean.
but it's not
There
impossible. Yeah.
yes, there's a realistic way. I think that's what you're trying to say, right? There's like a way to do both of these things, which is what is necessary.
Mhm.
Um, but we'll see. We'll see.
There's a lot of will sees. I think that's a constant, right?
That's a
With a lot of our
problem.
episodes.
Yeah. Well, let's get into. I think this is our one of our later topics here, but let's get into
Yeah.
Carter Hart. Is he having the best season of his career? Let's go to the goalie first. What do you think, Vasili?
Yeah, I mean, the stats probably, if you look at them, some people probably would look at the stats and point to the fact that, oh, he's not top 10 in certain metrics and things along those lines. So let me just bring them up here for you guys. So far this season, 18 games played. Carter Hart has a 2.82 goals against average and 911 save percentage. I mean, those numbers aren't top of the league in any regard, but it's also not at the bottom of the league. I mean, it's over league average. League average save percentage is around 905, so it's much above that. But I think the main thing to look out for Hart is just the fact that the team hasn't been very good. And a lot of these games, he's keeping them in games and just saving unreal attempts to do so. Case in point, the Avalanche game where he has two breakaways stops, one against Cale Makar. I believe the other one was against Charles Hudon. But I mean, those two breakaways, let's say Hart lets the goals in, it's a 3-3 game. It's completely different, right? So he's impacting the game positively for the Flyers every night. And he's a leader in the room as well, right? Because even if he has a bit of a struggle, like against New Jersey, where he gives the puck away, he's taking the blame for it himself, being that ultimate teammate, and he's bouncing back and playing one of his best games of the season, which I believe he did have against the Avalanche. Just a lot of really 10-bell saves. And I think, yeah, it's safe to say it's probably the best season of his career. Just in his calmness in the net, just his positioning, the way he's, I mean, moving laterally and making a lot of really athletic saves 2-on-1s and things like that. Like he's looked the best I've ever seen him personally, even though the stats don't point to like top 10 in the league or anything along those lines. But I mean, what does come up that, is something to note is, in goals saved above expected leaders, he's second in the league in that metric. So far this season, in all situations, expected goals against, he saved over 14.8 goals above average this season. So that means he's, you know, up there with the league leaders. He's saving a
Racing
lot.
goals.
Yeah, he's erasing goals. He's saving a lot of shots that the metrics and models are typically thinking should be a goal in terms of high quality chances. So it just shows like he's impacting the team. He's stopping goals that typically go in against most average goalies from going in against him. So I mean, he's pretty much the team's best player in my opinion this season. He's the team's most important player. Tortorella kind of mentioned that, right? That it's good that the team, was able to score 5 goals for him the other night and actually get him a 3-goal lead, 2-goal lead, because it hasn't happened often. And as a goalie, it's tough, right? When you're in a 1-goal games every single game that you're playing, sometimes you need a lead to help you out. So I think we're going to continue to see the great play from Hart as we go along. It's just encouraging, right? Because he's just entering his prime now. So that means he's not even at his peak of what he could potentially be as the team moves forward and hopefully improves. What do you think, Yuri, about Hart?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of thought this since he's entered the league. I think he's gotten better, but I think he's been. I think if you just look at his overall sample size, I think he is very talented. This team, if they continue to play this way around him, his numbers will continue to suffer.
Yeah, it's an easy
it's
way
without
to
a
point.
doubt.
Yeah, it's an easy thing to look at. Like for example, if you put him on the Devils, if you put him on Colorado, if you put him on a top tier
His
team,
numbers would
what
be
are his
top of the
numbers?
league.
They're going to be top of the league, right? It's
Yeah.
just like it's hard as a goalie when you constantly have so many high danger chances against you on a nightly basis to
And
actively save them all.
yeah,
And
and lack of support offensively, so that
yeah,
hurts your win column.
exactly.
It
All
hurts
that.
it hurts the way you're pushing at the end of the game, the way the team's pushing at the on you. How many late goals they give up late? Like
Because
obviously
just like a damn
the other
dam
night, two
finally
more
breaks.
goals. Yeah,
Yeah, I think a lot of the things with Hart in a lot of these games is like he keeps them in it. He keeps them in it. He keeps them in it. And the dam just finally breaks because there's just too much pressure against. There's only so many saves you can make as a goalie when there's just so many chances against, which we've seen. We kind of saw over the 10-game losing streak. I think lately, the last couple of games, it's been minimized a bit. And obviously, as we start to see guys come back, it helps him.
Yeah.
So hopefully, as they get healthy, that helps him and then helps the stats. But I think, yeah, if you're watching this season and thinking Carter Hart's your problem, or he hasn't been the best player on the team, or it hasn't been his best season, I don't think you're really keying into too much. So
Yeah.
that's my opinion. He's been great.
Yeah. And I guess so. I went to practice the other day, and I talked to Carter Hart a little bit. And we were just talking a little bit about his game. I brought up the fact that, he likes more high volume, but the guy just keeps it so simple. Even in the conversation, he's kind of just like, he's like straight up. He's like, I just want to see the shot, make the save. He didn't care. He's like, whatever happens, he's like, I react to it. He's like, that's all he says. He's like,
Yeah.
and honestly, I get it. And that's what Tortorella was talking about in the press conference when he was talking about the way he handles himself. The guy just makes no excuses. He doesn't dwell. He doesn't complain. And maybe he does it internally. Exteriorly, he doesn't do it. Like, he didn't seem rattled. Didn't seem rattled by my questions. Didn't seem like he was concerned about his game in any way. He was kind of just like, yeah, we just got to win more hockey games. Like, I'm just trying to save everything I can. That's it.
He's calm and he's focused, but that's the mentality that you want from your goalie, right? You want a
He
goalie
seems more mature, dude.
you want a goalie who's focused and matured, and I mean that's been a staple of his game and just his personality for a long time, right? People have said he's been mature, beyond his years.
Yeah.
And I think even as he's getting older, you're going to see him improve even more. And just like that's as a goalie, that's typically actually what it is, right? Like, what's your focus? The next shot, the next save, because that's just how the game goes for you, right? If you're not focused on that, that's when you kind of lose your game, lose your structure as a goalie, lose your net, and things kind of can unravel on you. So it's good to see Hart. I mean, just being in that mindset because it bodes well, I think, for just his future play and just his improvement as we even go along in his career. Because I do think he has the makings to be like a top 5 elite goalie in the NHL. I would say.
Yeah, just got to play well in front of him for once.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So next, I guess we'll talk about Travis Sanheim real quick. We did talk about it a little bit, but I do think we have him here, so I do think we should talk about the fact that at least his game has been improving. I think he was struggling a little bit to start the year, but you're noticing less of it. You brought it up earlier. I think you said it was eight points in 9 games, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, exactly.
Overall, I think it's interesting how the pairings are kind of playing out right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we're gonna see more shifting with the D, more than we were expecting.
I agree. I mean, Sealer's been a really big surprise, so I think that's been a factor.
Yeah.
Where you have now like a Provorov, Risto, Sanheim, Braun, and then Sealer, D'Angelo as a set. But I do see Tortorella mixing and matching. Like sometimes we'll throw Provorov, D'Angelo back together.
Yeah.
Sanheim, Risto line. I think he kind of is just mixing and matching it all based on the situation, where the team's at in the game. But just to touch on Sanheim, I've noticed kind of the last probably 10, maybe to 12 games, he's kind of been getting back to his game from last season. And what I mean by that is just jumping in the rush a lot more, carrying the puck. I think that's really his
had
game.
That goal.
Yeah, I think that's Colorado. His game and what he needs to do to be more successful is just rush the puck up ice. He has such great skating ability. And if you're the Flyers and you're a team that struggles with offense, why wouldn't you utilize that and have your defenseman carry it up into the zone for you, because it's going to help you create more offense, and just it makes it for an easier breakout if the play is there for you and for him to be doing that. It's not always going to be, but that's where it comes to him making judgment, right? For Sanheim, though, it's encouraging he's getting back to that. I think maybe it's a bit of a feeling out process with the new coach. It can be hard for a player like him because, I mean, Tortorella is strictly not a defense first coach, but he's known more for his defensive prowess. So if you're Sanheim looking to impress your new coach, you'll want to be running around up ice and making big mistakes and things like that. Even though I think Tortorella wanted to see that out of him, but I think maybe he was kind of unsure of when to pick his spots based on the new system and the new style of play the team's kind of looking and adhering towards. But it looks like he's kind of figuring that out and navigating those waters now and jumping in like, I mean, he's used to doing. So I think we're going to just kind of see his play improve and continue to be on a similar level to what it was in last season for sure.
Yeah, well said. And I'm hoping that continues too. I'm hoping that things level out. I was saying this to Chris on the phone last night. I think the reality that most of us have to be aware of, and I'm guilty of this as well. I am not excluding myself. I don't know if a lot of us have the gumption that it really takes to deal with a lot of this player development stuff. It's really uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to watch this team like get better and then get worse, and then people get injured,
It's
and
a
then
flowing process,
you
though,
want to,
man.
you literally just want to be like, dude, just throw this out the window. Like, how are we supposed to? But like, it's really, it's going to require a lot of patience and just consistency, and just let Tortorella do his thing, and just know that you're kind of in for the ride. And I think, with something like Sanheim, that's a type of guy, obviously there's been ups and downs in his career. I think it's completely acceptable to expect more of that even now. And let's see where it goes up. I mean, Tortorella has a history of doing this stuff. So first he breaks
Yeah.
it down, then he builds it up. So let's see what happens. Let's go to our last topic. We'll end on this. World Junior Camp invites. Cutter Gote gets the invite from Team USA, and Ethan Sampson gets the invite from Canada.
I think
Both.
Zanetti will probably go to Switzerland as well.
That's a good call out. Wait, did we trade Zanetti?
No.
Who did we trade? We traded somebody for Evan Barrett.
I'm not
It
100%
wasn't
sure
Zanetti. It
off the
wasn't
top of my
Zanetti.
head, but it wasn't him.
Somebody on the Phantoms. Never mind. Sorry. I remember name Z, and yeah. So yeah, Zanetti probably as well, but those are the two official ones. Cutter Gote obviously is a point per game right now. 8 goals and 4 assists in 12 games. It's 12 points in 12 games.
Yeah,
And
named Rookie of the Month too for
I missed that.
NCAA there. So
Oh, not surprising. And then also Ethan Sampson, 6 goals, 12 assists, 18 points in 22 games, 0.82, excuse me, point per game. And
that's
obviously
impressive for a big man
a
on
big
D.
solid right man with a right hand shot. We know we had the interview with Ethan's father on the podcast, Sean, friend
I'm
of the
try to get
show.
Ethan one of these days.
Yeah, we'll have to get him on here. But obviously, really great for him. I imagine they'll both make their respective teams, and
Yeah.
we'll be watching them compete at some point. That should be pretty exciting. I think watching Cutter Gote in World Juniors is a big deal for this
Yeah,
franchise
for a
right
lot
now.
of Flyers fans for sure. I mean, he's definitely going to be a top six option for them, I would say,
Yeah,
just based on
we'll
his
see what he
play.
plays though. Left wing or
Yeah, he
center,
might
right?
he
Probably
might
left
be.
wing.
I think he'll be a winger on that team just because he got Logan Cooley and some
It's just
other
how
center
strong the
options.
U.S. program is
Yeah,
in
exactly.
general,
But I mean,
and that he's a scorer.
who knows what happens between now and then? It's hockey, right? Like there could be injuries, so anything could really happen. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe we do see him at center, but I think it's going to be an interesting tournament. Obviously, just for Flyers fans to really see how talented he is, because we've been saying that he has an elite skill set, and I just think that with how down things have been for a lot of Flyers prospects, and just how some prospects haven't necessarily panned out as you would like in the past, it's hard for Flyers fans to get excited. So I think just seeing a guy like Gauthier rip it up in the World Juniors coming up, in December here would be a great thing for the fan base, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, well said. All right, well, let's end it on that. Do you have anything coming up, Vasili? Anything you want to tell people about?
Well, as this comes out today, I mean, there will also be an article paired with it as well, and I want to give a shout out actually to the Flyers in general. Today for their practice, they had Zachary Wirtz. He signed a 2-day contract at practice today. He's a 9-year-old from Egg Harbor, New Jersey, and was recently a recipient of a life-changing liver transplant. And he made his original Make-A-Wish in 2020, and he got to go out and practice with the Flyers and hang out with his favorite player, Travis Konechny, the whole day. So just for a kid to do that, who's had a tough goal the last couple of years, a tough run of things, I think it's just a great thing for the Flyers to do that and be involved in things like that.
Yeah, well said, my friend. Well said. Yeah, and good to hear, dude. And thank you everybody else for listening again. Really appreciate the support. We're working on some guests. We were actually supposed to have a guest tonight. We went through 3 different people, and all 3 of them had to cancel. So it is what it is. It's the holiday times though too. I'm not too worried about it. And Vasily and I just like talking to the mic anyway. So
Yeah,
we'll,
exactly.
we'll be doing more guests and stuff. We're talking about that still, but just stay tuned. Yeah, and again, humongous thank you to everybody that you guys keep listening. We're gonna keep doing this regardless of where the Flyers are going, up or down. And as we get closer to the draft again, we'll bring Steve back on and talk prospects soon. And
Yeah, maybe we'll even get our friend Craig too as well.
yeah, Craig Eagles. I was thinking about Craig as well. We got a lot of people to reach out to still, and it's just, oh man, I really want for fans to like I was talking to Chris, and he's in 19, and he's like, dude, I don't even know what it's like to watch a good Flyers team.
Which is
And I'm like,
sad for me to say that. Like, damn,
crazy,
that
dude.
sucks. That there
It's
is a generation of Flyers fans that literally have never seen a good Flyers team
yes,
realistically, which is nuts.
yes.
I think a good way to end is just, I mean, we hope as things progress, as the days go by, there's some positivity, for the Flyers fans, because it's been a rough go, and these last couple seasons have been a rough time.
Yeah, and good luck to us all. All right. Thank you, everybody. Again, we love you. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, share, do anything you can to help us. Check out the team store as well. Again, Rebecca set that up, and there's so much stuff in there. There's like all stuff for this podcast and all of our podcasts, honestly, for O&B as well. Shout out to Rebecca for setting all that up. So please check that out. And again, yeah. Thank you again, and stay strong. I have a feeling something good is bound to happen. Just life has a way of balancing out. All right, thank you again. We love you, and remember, always stay gritty.